Well, good Monday morning and welcome back, everyone, to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. You know, we're well into our study of the parables, and more specifically, the eschatology of the parables of Jesus. I have suggested to you that the eschatology of Jesus found in his parables absolutely falsifies any futurist eschatology. We have focused on, in the last several sessions, on the theme of martyr vindication that's found in Matthew chapter 21 and the parable of the wicked husbandman, Matthew 22, the parable of the great wedding feast, and then in Luke chapter 18, where Jesus told the parable of the importunate widow who kept crying out, "Avenge me on my adversary." And Jesus applied that to the cry of the martyrs. And he said, "Will not God avenge the elect who cry out to him day and night? Yes, I say, he will avenge them speedily." I've shared with you that from Genesis all the way through the Bible, the theme of martyr vindication is found in prophecy after prophecy after prophecy of the last days, in prophecies of the coming of the Lord, and invariably, that theme is found in reference to the coming of the Lord against Israel, Old Covenant Israel, for killing God's martyrs. Now, I've simply not focused on a ton of verses that we could have brought up. But, this series could almost go on and on and on. It already has. But I want to begin now a focus on the book of Revelation in light of Jesus' promise of martyr vindication. Not only in Luke chapter 18, Matthew 21, and Matthew 22. Because you see, when we look at Matthew 21, and we look at Matthew 22, and we look at Luke 18, those three parables can be found being echoed over and over and over in the book of Revelation. I'm not going to say that they're the source of Revelation by any means, but I'm simply saying that those three parables are clearly echoed in the book of Revelation. We'll get to some of that, all right? But for this morning's introductory session, I simply want you to note that in Matthew 21, Matthew 22, and Luke chapter 18, we find the promise and the idea of filling up the measure of sin by persecution, leading to the coming of the Lord in judgment. Watch this. Matthew 21. The master of the vineyard led out his vineyard to husbandmen. When the time of the harvest came, he sent his servants to gather the harvest. Those servants were killed. He sent more. They were killed. He finally said, "I'll send my son. Surely they will honor him." They killed him. What happened? They filled the measure of their sin. Matthew 22. The great wedding invitation went out. All things are ready. Come to the feast. The servants were mistreated. They were beaten. They were killed. The master couldn't take it anymore. In other words, the measure of sin and suffering was filled up. He sent out his armies. He killed those wicked men and burned their city. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus says, "Will not God avenge his elect who cry out to him day and night? Yes, he will avenge them speedily." Now, I understand it doesn't specifically say the measure of sin would be filled up, the measure of suffering would be filled up, but that's the thought. In other words, the time was coming very quickly in which martyrdom, the last days measure of martyrs, would be filled up. That is when Yahweh would act. Now look at Revelation chapter 6, 9 and following. John said, under the fifth seal, he saw under the altar the souls of those who had been beheaded for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried out, how long, O Lord? Well, here's Luke 18. Here's Luke 18. How long, O Lord, holy and true, do you not avenge us? That's Luke 18. On those who are on the earth. They were given white robes, and they were told to rest, now watch this, until their fellow brethren, who should be slain as they were, should be fulfilled, filled up. So just like Matthew 21, just like Matthew 22, just like the parable in Luke 18, you have the measure of the martyrs being filled up, and as the direct corollary, you have the measure of the sin of the persecutors filled up. And what do you find in Revelation 6, 12 and following? You find the great and the terrible day of the Lord. The day of vengeance against the persecutors. The day of vindication of the martyrs. When did Jesus say that was going to take place? Well, let's see. Matthew 21, in the judgment of those who kept the vineyard, Israel. Matthew 22, those who had been invited to the wedding, Israel, the city of the persecutors. Luke 18, we're not told specifically who it is, but the judgment was coming soon. When we couple all of those with Revelation chapter 6, there is no question whatsoever that the day of the Lord was to be Jesus' coming in judgment of Old Covenant Israel for filling up the measure of their sin and filling up the suffering of the martyrs. And that happened at his coming in AD 70. Hey, look, I explore this and a whole lot more in my book. We shall meet him in the air. Pardon me, the wedding of the King of Kings. Go to my website, eschatology.org and bibleprophecy.com. Order the book. Mention that you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook, and I'll refund your shipping. I will also include my lesson given at Criswell College in 2012 on martyr vindication and the millennium. This is fantastic stuff. Thanks so much for joining me for this morning's morning musings. We will see you with more on martyr vindication in the book of Revelation and the parables on the flip side.